It's the Stone Age. This isn't a line from some dusty history documentary. This is the stark, unforgiving reality of the 21st century unfolding in major European cities. We're talking about urban centers where the lights go out for up to 18 hours a day, plunging millions into a disorienting twilight. Imagine elevators frozen between floors, their occupants trapped in vertical steel coffins. Picture sprawling intersections where traffic lights are nothing more than dead glass, turning every crossing into a game of Russian roulette. Envision hospitals, the last bastions of modern science, running on screaming diesel generators, their fuel supplies dwindling, their staff praying the power holds through one more critical surgery. This is a world where millions of people now live their lives by the clock of the power grid, their daily routines dictated by a simple, brutal calculus. At what hour will they have enough electricity to boil water for their children? Or to charge the phone that is their only link to the outside world, their only source of news, their only way to know if loved ones are still alive? In some neighborhoods, the darkness is compounded by a creeping thirst. Water pressure drops so catastrophically that faucets run dry for all but a few precious minutes a day, forcing families to choose between flushing a toilet and saving a liter to drink. Then, just as suddenly as it came, the water is gone, and the darkness returns. Behind every one of these blackouts are cold, hard numbers that cut like a surgeon's scalpel. Ukraine's nuclear reactors, the backbone of its energy system, continue to hum, generating nearly 50% of the nation's power. But this is a fragile foundation. Around them, a systematic campaign of destruction has been unleashed. Gas-fired power plants and hydroelectric dams, the very facilities that provide the grid with its flexibility and ability to respond to demand, have been systematically targeted, shattered by precision strikes. The result is a nation of islands. Entire neighborhoods are disconnected, isolated, and profoundly vulnerable. Industrial cities, home to nearly 100,000 souls that once lit up half a continent with the fires of their factories, now cannot guarantee a single night of warmth for their own citizens as winter's chill begins to bite. This is not a metaphor. It is a dire warning. The full story, the one you won't hear on the mainstream networks, is coming up next. From the broadcast desk of the American Standard, this is the Frontline Report. I'm John Carter. Tonight, we turn our eyes to a nation in its death throes. Ukraine is agonizing. Kyiv is going dark. The images trickling out of the capital paint a terrifying portrait of a city that once boasted of its modernity, now sliding, hour by agonizing hour, into a kind of modern-day Stone Age. Entire city blocks are swallowed by an oppressive darkness, vast concrete jungles devoid of light. The elevators that once whisked people up to their high-rise apartments are now silent tombs. The streets, stripped of their traffic signals, have become chaotic and dangerous. For the people of Kyiv, life has been stripped down to its bare essentials. Their existence is now a frantic cycle of waiting for the next sliver of electricity, a 2 or 3 hour window to cook a meal, to charge a phone, to pump a few gallons of water before the power, and with it, modern life, evaporates once more. While official speeches from Kyiv are filled with defiant promises of ultimate victory, the reality on the ground is a desperate struggle for survival. The Russian armed forces have made a calculated, strategic decision to strike at the invisible heart of the nation, its energy system. They have deliberately avoided the nuclear power plants, which continue to generate a steady baseline of about half of Ukraine's electricity. Instead, they are methodically dismantling the thermal gas and hydroelectric plants. These are not just random targets. They are the crucial components that give the system its flexibility, its ability to ramp up power during peak hours. This devastatingly effective strategy has trapped Ukraine's major cities in a perfect, inescapable snare. On one hand, you have the massive nuclear reactors, which provide a constant, unwavering flow of power but cannot be quickly adjusted to meet fluctuating demand. On the other hand, the backup plants, the nimble thermal stations designed to handle those very surges, are now smoldering ruins. The result is a grid that is both powerful and paralyzed. Political scientist Alexei Ampelov explained the grim mechanics of this strategy with chilling clarity, reminding his audience of the fundamental limitations of nuclear power generation. A nuclear reactor is simply not designed for this purpose, he stated. It only supplies baseload power. But when energy consumption spikes across the grid, what we call the morning and evening peaks, when people come home, turn on all their lights, and consume vast amounts of electricity, the system needs to respond. At that precise moment, the flexible capacity that is no longer there, the capacity needed to maintain this daily rhythm, is what fails. The blackouts aren't an accident, the expert concluded. They are the direct, intended outcome of a relentless campaign against thermal plants and dams. The effect of this on the streets of Kyiv and other major cities is brutal, almost medieval. Ampelov recounted the stories he hears from his own friends trapped in the capital. It's not the total, cinematic blackout of a Hollywood disaster movie. It's something far more insidious, a slow, grinding deprivation that lasts 16, 17, sometimes even 18 hours a day. Imagine that for a moment. Light arrives in brief, ration bursts, perhaps twice a day for 2 or 3 hours at a time. The rest of the day, the long, cold, dark remainder, unfolds without any power at all. This isn't just an inconvenience. It represents a fundamental shift in civilization. As Ampelov explained in a recent interview on a Russian program, when the electricity is cut for almost the entire day, it's not just the lights that go out. The internet collapses or becomes so intermittent it's useless. Water pumping stations grind to a halt. The sewage system backs up and fails. Central heating becomes a memory. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. The supply of wastewater disposal, heat, and water is completely interrupted. In other words, the city is becoming its own opposite. A modern metropolis, built to function as an intricate, indivisible network of systems, is suddenly revealed to be fragile, almost uninhabitable. And it is here that the phrase crystallizing the entire Russian strategy emerges. Ukraine, Ampelov says, is returning to the Stone Age. Not because its buildings have crumbled or its roads have disappeared, but because the foundational pillars of modern urban life, light, water, heat, and communication, are collapsing in a catastrophic domino effect. The optimistic pronouncements from Kyiv, the reassurances that everything is under control, ring hollow against the stark reality of a dead electrical outlet, a dry faucet, and a cold radiator as the thermometer plummets. Paradoxically, the only thing preventing a total, absolute blackout across the entire country is the very Soviet legacy that Kyiv has spent decades trying to erase. Old transmission lines, crumbling substations, and antiquated power plants inherited from the USSR are now, against all odds, holding the last threads of the energy grid together. Ukraine is surviving not because of decades of promised Western reforms and modernization, but because of the industrial skeleton that Moscow built in a different era, a skeleton that is now enduring bombs, neglect, and rampant corruption. The capital city of Kyiv itself, much like Moscow, possesses its own integrated power generation system. This includes combined heat and power plants, or cogeneration plants, like the infamous CHP-5 and CHP-6, the very same facilities that now regularly appear in Russian airstrike reports. These urban power stations, designed in Soviet times to provide both electricity and district heating to surrounding neighborhoods, have become priority military targets. When they are hit, it's not just an electrical map that goes dark. It's the homes, the hospitals, the schools. The very air inside grows cold, and with it, the hope of the people. This combination of precision strikes on critical infrastructure and a desperate reliance on an old, unmodernized legacy system reveals a truth that Russia's enemies are loath to admit. The Ukrainian state is running on the fumes of its past, fighting a war conceived with the logic of the present, but managed with the hollow rhetoric of the future. Every hour without light throws that glaring contradiction into sharper relief. Promises of European integration sound utterly absurd when people are forced to haul buckets of water up 20 flights of stairs in the dark. And while Kyiv freezes, the front lines are heating up. The Russian advance is pressing towards key cities, and nowhere is this clearer than in Konstantinovka, in the Donetsk People's Republic, a city just 42 miles from Donetsk itself. There, according to sources even within the Ukrainian military, Russian forces are on the verge of launching a large-scale assault. This isn't a claim coming from Moscow, it's a grim admission from their adversaries, which gives it a particular, undeniable weight. For years, Konstantinovka was a linchpin of Ukraine's defensive strategy in the Donbass. The city was transformed into a formidable fortified zone, a bastion guarding the critical supply routes to the strategic hubs of Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, two names the world has come to associate with ferocious, unrelenting battles since 2014. It was a logistical and defensive knot, presented to the world as an impenetrable wall against the Russian advance. Today, that wall is riddled with cracks, and a major assault is being prepared from multiple flanks. Intelligence reports indicate that Russian troops have established firm footholds in parts of the city, severing logistical routes and methodically preparing for coordinated attacks from several directions. This isn't a simple land grab for territory. It is a sophisticated operation aimed at seizing control of the arteries of war, the access points, the main roads, and the secondary paths. In modern warfare, the side that controls the logistics controls the pulse of the battle. And in Konstantinovka, that pulse is now beating to a Russian rhythm. A particularly revealing piece of testimony comes from a former ultranationalist member of the notorious Azov unit, now an officer in the Ukrainian armed forces, known only by his call sign, Malfer. He openly admits that the Russians have seized the initiative in the urban logistical battle. All entrances, access routes, and supply lines for Ukrainian personnel are under constant surveillance and fire control, he reported. In other words, Russia is not just advancing with infantry and artillery, it is waging a technological war of intelligence and interdiction, leaving the city's defenders blind, isolated, and increasingly paralyzed. According to these same reports, Russian forces are consolidating their positions, especially in the southeastern part of the city. Fierce fighting continues in the surrounding areas near Berstok, Stepanki, and in Konstantinovka proper. Intense clashes are also raging in Borobivka, where both sides are desperately vying for control of key tactical positions. According to the Ukrainian analysis group Military Analytics, each of these town names marks another point on a map that is slowly, inexorably closing around the city, like a tightening noose. Colonel Konstantin Mashevets, another Ukrainian military analyst, concedes that Russian forces are close to achieving a near-complete operational encirclement. He attempts to temper the alarm, claiming that for now, the Russians are merely concentrating their forces and preparing for the assault. Yet his own warning betrays the gravity of the situation. He admits that after concluding operations in the Pokrovsk and Myrnarod area, and after assessing the Dobrapilya sector, the next logical step for Moscow will be to launch a direct, full-scale attack on Konstantinovka itself. Behind the tactical maps and arrows lies a real city, with a vibrant and proud history. According to the 2001 census, Konstantinovka was home to 94,886 people. In Soviet times, it was a jewel of industry. Its 3 massive glass factories produced up to 23% of all glass products for the entire Soviet Union. Today, that same city that once illuminated hundreds of thousands of homes across the vast Soviet space with its crystal and glassware now finds itself threatened by the darkness of war and the imminent possibility of Russian troops entering its streets. The paradox is staggering and deeply poignant. While Kiev sells itself to the world as the capital of a new, progressive Europe, its own neighborhoods endure 18-hour blackouts. And while its government vows to resist down to the last square meter of land, industrial cities like Konstantinovka, built and brought to prominence under the USSR, are steadily passing into the hands of the very army that is demonized day and night in the official narrative. The chasm between rhetoric and reality is widening with every passing hour, and each new power outage makes it impossible to ignore. And so, the nation that was once part of the industrial heart of the Soviet Union is sliding towards a very peculiar, modern kind of Stone Age. A world of high-rise buildings without running water, of failing sewage networks, of official state propaganda that vanishes the moment the television signal dies, all while the front line advances relentlessly toward its vital urban centers. Ukraine is not just retreating on the military map, it is regressing in its basic conditions of life, in its stability, in its most fundamental certainties. Meanwhile, Russia continues to strike precisely where the Ukrainian system is most vulnerable, at the energy grid that keeps the propaganda machine alive, and at the logistical nodes that sustain the front lines. Moscow's enemies can repeat their slogans and wave their flags, but when the television won't turn on and the supply convoy doesn't arrive, the official narrative crumbles into dust. Who can promise a light at the end of the tunnel? The problem, for millions of ordinary Ukrainians, is that today, the tunnel is completely, utterly dark. This is John Carter for the American Standard. Thank you for tuning into the Frontline Report. If you value this kind of independent journalism and want to be part of a community dedicated to seeking the truth, please subscribe to our channel. To ensure you never miss a report, click the notification bell. And if you wish to support our work and help us continue bringing you the stories the establishment media ignores, you can find a link to our PayPal in the video description. On behalf of the entire team here at the American Standard, I want to thank you for listening. Stay informed and stay free.